4 days ago, Michigan already had one of the best defenses in the Big Ten and maybe all of college football heading into 2024. But after adding 4 studs in the secondary, do the Wolverines definitely have the best defense in the conference?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
When you have players like Will Johnson, who might be the best defensive back corner in the game, when you have Mason Graham, who might be the best defensive tackle in the game and a top 10 potential NFL draft pick, you already have one of the Big Tens and one of college football's best defensive units. But Sharon Moore and Wink Martindale decided to take it to another level, specifically in the secondary, with 4 huge additions over the last 4 days. This Michigan program, even dating back to Jim Harbaugh, is all about depth and it's all about experience. Having that depth and having that experience is what has built Michigan into the power that they have become the last few seasons. These recent additions were in the secondary. And when you look at this secondary returning for next season, this was already a really, really good secondary. I already mentioned Will Johnson, who might be one of the best players in college football, certainly one of the best defensive players in college football. He will lock that side of the field down. Makari Page was a starting safety for the Wolverines last season. Quentin Johnson, highly thought of. Okay, he's slated to possibly be that next safety next to Makari Page. And then Jaden McBurrows, a nickel that they really liked. When they shifted things around, when Will Johnson wasn't available for the Big Ten championship game, Mikey Sanders still headed over to corner. It was Jaden McBurrows that stepped into that nickel role. So 4 out of these 5 defensive backs that will likely start when Michigan hits the field on Big Ten Saturday night against Fresno State to open the season are likely going to be incumbents, are likely going to be people who know this system, because we know Wink Martindale is all a part of this tree that exists with Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter as well. A big reason why Michigan went after this amount of depth and this type of talent in the secondary is I believe they're going to need it on the back end this season. And they have it, certainly. Like when you talk about this system, this scheme that is of the NFL mold, and Wink Martindale we know has been in the NFL for a long period of time. He has been within this type of system for a long period of time. That's why he came in, because it's familiar to what's already been established in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We know that they are going to rely on a lot of these guys in the back end on an island, because what we've been hearing, what we've seen from Wink Martindale, this guy loves the blitz more than anybody. So you need good corners, you need safeties, you need nickels, you need a lot of guys in those heavy defensive back packages that are going to be able to cover, because a lot of times those guys could be out on an island. Let's start talking about these transfers, why don't we? I want to first talk about that experience, because that is a huge deal. I want to start with Aamir Hall, who comes from UAlbany. I think the opposite corner of Will Johnson could be up for grabs. And I love Aamir Hall and what he brings to the table. An FCS All-American, stands at 6'1", 200 pounds. He is a bigger type of corner, a more physical type of corner that Wink Martindale is absolutely going to love. I think he fits into the mold of a Michigan corner, of a Michigan defensive back, and what they expect from him at that type of role. Last year, 57 tackles, 5 interceptions, and he's all over receivers like glue. An 88.3 Pro Football Focus coverage grade. That's as good as it gets. He's really, really good back there in coverage. And I mentioned his size. Michigan expects their defensive backs to play near the line of scrimmage. And he is a tackling corner. He is a player that will attack the line of scrimmage and play in the box and be a bigger part to this run defense. When we talk about experience, Wesley Walker is that type of guy. Now, this is his last year of college football. It will be his 6th year of eligibility. This is the type of guy that Michigan loves to bring in. Played at Georgia Tech, played at Tennessee, started 10 games last year for the Volunteers for that Big Orange defense. And when you look at Walker, 89 tackles over the last 2 seasons. So he's been a contributor the last 2 years. These next 2 guys might not be starters, but they have 2 years of eligibility remaining. So if they're depth pieces this year, they can step up and be starters and maybe all Big Ten performers next season. Ricky Johnson coming over from UNLV, another 6'1" corner, another corner that can step up and play in the box, another corner that can help Michigan be one of the top run defenses in all of college football. 71 tackles, 14 pass breakups, and 4 interceptions in his final 25 games at UNLV. Once again, it's that experience. It's putting up good level of football. That translates to what Michigan wants to do on the defensive side of the football. If you put Johnson and Johnson in corner, these Michigan DBs are going to be more than just a Band-Aid. That would be a pretty good combination if it ends up being that. And I think the name that really stood out over the last 4 days was some Michigan in-state transfer action when you saw Michigan State safety, now former Michigan State safety, Jaden Mangham, transfer from the Spartans to the Wolverines. He was an all-Big Ten honorable mention player last season. Over 50 tackles, 4 interceptions last year for the Spartans. I know Michigan State has not been a great team back there in the secondary, but you take that talent, maybe in a poor scheme and more poor talent around him at MSU, and then you flip it over to Michigan. I could see him being in the battle with a Quentin Johnson at safety this season because of what we've seen from him on film at MSU. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind, Jaden Mangham is going to be on the football field this year. Jaden Mangham is going to be a big part of this Wolverines defense. Another year, and it looks like yet another fantastic Michigan defense. But is this Wolverines unit, like other past years of recent history, is it the best defense in the Big Ten Conference? Man, when you choose the best defense in this conference, it's like dipping your hand into a bag of Skittles. No matter what flavor you pull out, you're going to have a pretty good time, and it's going to taste pretty good, because when you look at some of these defensive units, they are the best in college football, right? When you're looking at a lot of national pundits right now that are looking at some of the best defenses in the country, you're looking at a handful of Big Ten units, and you're looking at Georgia. Okay, that's how much people respect the Big Ten defensively nationally. I believe Michigan and Ohio State is the choice. Okay, there are other really good units in this conference. Oregon is a fantastic unit. I want to see their transfers gel together. Jabbar Muhammad, the Kobe Savage, the Derek Harmon. I want to see how that all gels together. What about some of these guys from that recruiting class a couple of years ago, like the Mateo Uyungleleles? Can they step up and be a all-conference type of performer? I want to see it all gel in year one in the Big Ten Conference before I really put them on that elite pedestal and what we've seen the last handful of seasons from Michigan and Ohio State defensively. Penn State is another example. They may have the best pass rush in college football this year with Abdul Carter on one side and DDS, Danny Dennis Sutton, on the other side. What are they up the middle? What about their young linebackers? Can they step up with Abdul Carter going to the defensive line? What about the corners? Okay, there are some question marks on 3 levels of the Penn State defense where I feel pretty solidified of what the Wolverines and the Buckeyes are. And then you throw in teams like Iowa and Nebraska. I just believe Michigan and Ohio State have more and better NFL type of talent than what exists in Iowa City and Lincoln. Those are still really solid defenses. When you start to compare the Michigan defense against the Ohio State defense, and I'm sure Wolverines and Buckeye fans love to be compared, right? I think you got to start up front. You got to start on that defensive line. National championships are won in the trenches. It's not just the Big Ten, folks. I know the Big Ten is viewed as this conference that's, hey, it's all about the trenches. It's all about the trenches. But I believe that's just college football. That's football in general. You have to be good in the trenches to get to that championship type of level. So when we start to compare these defensive lines, I think Ohio State has the advantage on the exterior of the D-line. I think Michigan has the advantage on the interior of the D-line. Okay, when you look at the interior for the Wolverines, Mason Graham is a potential top 10 NFL draft pick. Kenneth Grant, you put those two guys together, it's probably the best combination of interior defensive linemen in all of college football. When you look to the outside for Ohio State, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. That is going to be a lethal combination coming off the edge. There is going to be an ongoing theme when we talk about scarlet and gray, when we talk about maize and blue defenses. I think up front, Ohio State, when you talk about their starting defensive linemen, I think their starters have a slight edge over Michigan. They have 3 all Big Ten players from last year. The Wolverines have 2. But I believe Michigan has more depth in the room once you get beyond those guys, the rotational type of players to keep some of these Mason Grahams, Kenneth Grant, Derek Moores, and Josiah Stewarts, to keep those type of guys fresh. We're going to talk about that when it comes to another group here on the defense. I believe Michigan is deeper, but Ohio State up front with Ty Hamilton, with Tyleik Williams, I just believe their starting front is just a smidge better on the defensive line. Let's talk linebackers, because when I look at both of these defensive line is elite, and I think the secondaries are elite. Linebackers, both teams are replacing a fair amount of talent. You look at guys like Jalen Harrell and Junior Colson for the Wolverines. You look at defending Big Ten linebacker of the year, Tommy Eichenberg for Ohio State, as well as Steel Chambers. There's some production there to replace. I think I just feel better about the replacements for Michigan than I do. And I think they've shown me a little bit more than I think some of the replacements over there in Columbus, Ohio. I love Jayshawn Barham coming over. That is an underrated national transfer. He put up some really good production over at Maryland. I thought he was one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten over at Maryland. Now you put him in a scheme in a big leading role like he will be at Michigan. I think that's going to take his game to the next level. I think he is going to be now a more nationally known linebacker. Ernest Hausman had a really good year his freshman year at Nebraska. He came to Michigan to play in this type of system, and he knew that he was not going to be in the starting lineup like he was going to be in Lincoln. Now he is, after you lose some of those linebackers to the National Football League. You look at Cody Simon, you look at CJ Hicks, 5-star guy, hasn't gotten on the field a ton. They're going to move Sonny Styles to linebacker as well. I think there's some really good talent in that linebacker room in Columbus, Ohio. I just think it's a little bit more proven right now at Michigan. I look at the secondaries of both of these teams very similarly to what I view the defensive lines. I think Ohio State's starting group is elite. I think it is as good as it gets in college football when you factor in the Denzel Burks, Davison Igbinison, when you factor in Lathan Ransom, when you factor in Caleb Downs coming over. It is an elite unit. Once you get beyond that starting unit, where is the depth for the Buckeyes? I was recently listening to some Ohio State podcasts that had the same exact type of question. We were just talking. This is what this whole commentary is about. It's about the depth of talent in the secondary for the Michigan Wolverines. They have tremendous depth on the back end, right? If one guy gets hurt, if 2 guys get hurt, they're not going to have a lot of sweat coming off their brow on this defensive coaching staff for Michigan, because they know that we go back to the experience. Because they know that these guys have been there and done that. They've played a lot of college football, and they're going to be able to step in. Ohio State, I think, has better talent in that starting group. Not by much, but I think they've got better talent. Michigan might be a little bit more experienced and a little bit deeper on the back end in that secondary. We know this scheme works at Michigan. Okay, even though you have a new coordinator, it's within the same family that we've seen with Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter. So you know the pieces already work and you're not building a new puzzle, so to speak. Just because Michigan may not be the most talented defense in the country doesn't mean they can't be the best defense in the Big Ten or college football. What do you think? Who do you think is a better defense? Michigan, Ohio State, or do you think Oregon, Iowa, Nebraska, Penn State, maybe somebody else like that? And is Michigan going to have the best secondary? What do you think of these additions? Leave all that and more possibly in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.